Well, would you look at that? It seems you all hit my like goal on that last video, and because of that, I believe that merits some kind of reward for my loyal subject. I mean subscribers. Yes, that's totally what I meant. If you're new here and confused about what's going on, I highly recommend checking out the first part of this series before jumping into this video. But for a brief summary of what's going on here, and what this story is about, a couple weeks ago I tackled the question of what might have happened if Robert and his wife Cersei managed to produce a trueborn heir to the Iron Throne. More importantly, a daughter, under the name of Lysandra Baratheon, the rightful queen of Westeros after her father's sudden death, if you discount Daenerys and any other Targaryen claimants out there. In the last video, we discussed her early life, her relationship with her siblings, her rivalry with her brother Joffrey in particular, her fostering on Dragonstone, and her rise as a queen and claimant for the throne during the War of Five Kings, which I would say needs a new name now given that one of the monarchs is a woman instead of a man. But I digress. You guys clearly wanted more of this story, so I consider it my duty to deliver, and depending on how this ends, I may be inclined to do more. So stay tuned for the end. Make sure to like and subscribe, because here we go. Lady Catelyn has finally come back to Robb's camp. The journey to and from Renly's camp had been decently long, and with no shortage of surprises, for Renly's willingness to compromise, and the surprise appearance of Lysandra Baratheon. That had surprised her the most, to say the least. She had heard tales of the girl, the oldest daughter of the late king, as bold as her father and as pretty as her mother. She'd never seen her in person before, nor had she expected to when she rode out to meet Renly that day. She looked just like King Robert with that dark hair of hers, and it was clear that she had a bit of his attitude in her, though a bit more tamed than her father from what she saw. But it was the eyes that drew her attention the most. They unnerved her. That was all Cersei from what she saw. Green spools of fire that threatened to burn you if you got too close. There was such a determination there, though she seemed amiable enough. Time would tell if her offer of possible alliance held any merit, though. Still, even amidst all this uncertainty, Catelyn couldn't help but wonder on the way back to her son's camp. She was around the same age as Robb, and if the tales were true, the only true child of King Robert. Maybe, just maybe, if things had gone differently, she might have been the one to wed one of her children. She could have been Robb's wife, and Sansa may never have been given away to the loathsome Joffrey. She might have still been at Winterfell with her sister Arya, safe from the Lannisters. It was hard to think. This one difference, this one change in decision could have saved her family from all this heartache, had things gone well. She put the thought aside, though. Best not to think on what could have been. Besides, Robb was already engaged now. That was the price they paid for crossing south, courtesy of the late Walder Frey. Something that Catelyn has to remind her son when she returns to his encampment and catches him flirting with the Lady Talissa. There is a warm exchange between the two of them, as the son welcomes back the mother, and they talk of duty, responsibility, but is quickly soured by news brought from Roose Bolton. Theon Greyjoy has betrayed them and taken Winterfell for his own. This makes Catelyn's heart seize with terror. She thinks back to her earlier musings, of Sansa and Arya being safe at home, if Lysandra had only married Robb. She wonders now if that would have even been good anymore. With Theon taking Winterfell, she shudders to think what might have happened to her girls had they been there. After all, she knew the old ways of the Ironborn. But with luck, they would be dealt with soon enough. Ultimately, Robb would adhere to Roose Bolton's advice on how to secure Winterfell again, by dispatching the Lord's illegitimate son to secure the castle and his brothers, all the while hoping that they were safe, and that Theon hadn't harmed them. In the meantime, after sending Roose away, hoping for some good news, Robb would inquire with his mother about Renly and his thoughts on an alliance. His mother tells him that Renly has agreed to a potential alliance, and if Robb helped him take the Iron Throne, he was more than willing to let him go on calling himself King in the North. This initial thought excites Robb, and gives him a glimmer of hope in this dire situation. He could keep his independence and gain a powerful ally in taking down the Lannisters. That's what he thinks, until Catelyn quickly elaborates on the specifics of Renly's proposal. Robb could continue calling himself King of the North, but that's all it would be. A king in name only, but not practice, as he would still be expected to kneel and bend the knee to Renly. A king in title, but not a king in practice, as he would still be expected to bend the knee to Renly at the end of the day. Robb knows he should accept, This is probably the best offer he's going to get in this war, and possibly the only real way for him to win this as well. But still, it sits wrong with him. He just lost his home, and now, in order to win the war, he has to give up his title as well, his standing. It feels like a slap in the face, but more than that, it feels like a betrayal to his people, the Northerners. They made him their king. He stood for them. They placed their hopes on him, and he chose to uphold those hopes the moment he took up the crown. If he took Renly's deal, then in a way, he was invalidating them, betraying their dream, their trust in him to make Northern independence a reality. His title wouldn't be the only thing that was hollow. His oath to them would be as well. If he gave up the kingship, would his people still follow him? Or would they feel slighted and walk away? He would need to take some time to consider this offer. But before he leaves his mother, she tells him that he may have more than one option here, elaborating that Renly wasn't the only one to make him a proposition. Lysandra Baratheon, Robert's true daughter, expressed a desire to talk with Robb for terms on an alliance. Catelyn specifies that they never went into detail about these possible terms, however. Their meeting had been short, and things had been relatively hostile between the girl and her uncle. And by the time she went to their camp later on, she found that they had already left for Dragonstone. She cites that it didn't appear that they had enough military might to face Renly in the Reach on the field of battle. But even so, they still had assets that Robb could make use of. Men, ships, and men who knew how to sail those ships. The military mind of Stannis Baratheon could be invaluable to Robb as well. Though he was managing well enough on his own, it couldn't hurt to have an extra voice for counsel. Robb wanted to scoff at the notion. Someone like Stannis would rather put his head on a block than fill it with meaningful advice. Though Lady Catelyn takes care to remind him that it's not Stannis who's at the helm of this operation, it's his niece. And from how it appears, having seen her up close herself, Lysandra is the daughter of Cersei and Robert. She's the only child of his father's best friend. He could at least hear her out, for Ned's sake. But Robb is hesitant, and he tells his mother as much. Even if she is the daughter of King Robert, she is also the daughter of Queen Cersei, as she said herself. She's a lion just as much as she is a stag, and her brother had his father's head lopped off in public. So how could he really trust her? Was he supposed to like her just because she was fighting against Joffrey, her own brother? That's more because he took her birthright than because she hates him, or because he unjustly killed his father. Of course, he doesn't know that she indeed does hate her brother. But I digress. If he were to help her take the throne, what are the odds that she won't turn around, put him in irons and take his head instead? The Lannisters have been treacherous before, so why should he consider her any different? Just because her father happened to be the king? Catelyn doesn't have much to say in response to this, knowing that her son is making some kind of sense. Blood and names only matters so much in Westeros. Her sister Lysa was a prime example. She was Robb's aunt. Her son was his cousin. The two women had grown up together, married on the same day. And yet when Robb called for war, she refused to rise. She sent no men and responded to no letters. The only solace she could take was that it seemed her sister hadn't taken up with the Lannisters. At least, not yet. When it came to Lysandra, Catelyn admits that they could never be certain of the girl's intentions. But it was either her or Renly. And if her son didn't wish to give up his status and still rejected her offer, then it would mean fighting this war alone, which likely wouldn't end well, especially with the aunt's betrayal. Eventually, Robb gives in. He makes no promises but says that he'll hear what she has to say, should she come seeking them. So he writes a letter to Dragonstone, addressed to the Queen herself, saying that he would be more than willing to hear her terms at Riverrun, as that was the next place that he would be going, for the funeral of his grandfather, Lord Hoster Tully. On Dragonstone, Stannis sits with his niece Lysandra in their war room, surrounded by the ancient carvings of a bygone house his brother nearly destroyed. Lady Melisandre is also present, though not seated. She stands off in the corner, staring into the flickering flame of a brazier. Her presence unnerved the queen, like it always had since she was a child, but like all times before, she tolerated her presence for the sake of her uncle, who was still displeased about her newly formed plan to go north and meet with a young wolf, Robb Stark, the eldest son of her father's oldest friend, and a man spurned by the Lannisters, and her half-brother, as she was as well. He was also a traitor, by all accounts, like Joffrey, her mother, and Uncle Renly. Her Uncle Stannis wouldn't stop reminding her. But as it stood, they had the most common ground and reasons to support each other. They were both fighting for something more than power. They were fighting for love, for family, vengeance. She hoped to use this to sway Robb to align with her. But Stannis was keen to shoot this idea down. He spared no expense when it came to his thoughts as Hand of the Queen, and whatever he felt, he would let it be known. And how he felt about his niece's plan was that it was foolish. For the past several hours, they had talked in circles in the privacy of this room. Lysandra believed that this was her only hope for allies, but as they traitor to the realm, seeking to take half of it with him should his ploy for independence succeed, Stannis heavily disagreed with Robb Stark. Even after his letter made its way to Dragonstone and he let it be known that he was willing to hear their terms, in Stannis' mind, unless Robb Stark was willing to swear fealty, there was no point in seeking his men for their cause. In no way should they ever stand on equal terms. It was his firm belief that Robb should be dealt with accordingly, like any other traitors to the crown would be. Still, though, the young queen disagreed. When faced with the vastly superior armies of her uncle and the Lannisters, Robb Stark was her only option to truly bolster her forces in a way that might matter. Though with luck, Renly and the Lannisters could wear each other down as they fight over King's Landing, which was still all the more reason to get more men, just in case they were so weakened that she was able to finish them off and truly secure her reign. In addition, as of right now, Robb has shown some skill on the battlefield, having beaten and outsmarted the likes of her grandfather Tywin, though he continues his terror campaign in the Riverlands, and he managed to take her uncle Jaime captive. That was no small feat in this war, especially to her. In her youth, most days she thought her Uncle Jaime was untouchable. Next to bold Barristan who trained her, if she desired to be as good as anyone, it would have been him. So for Robb to take him down before the war ever truly started spoke volumes, and the way he went about doing it, even more so. A mind like that could be useful to her efforts. As for how to reel him in and see the true value of a partnership, that was a different story. But as it stood, with the realm divided, the Greyjoys going rogue, and the Vale silent, and her family against her on both sides, this was the only option that they truly wanted to continue in this war without being wiped out by her grandfather or her uncle. She let this thought be known to Stannis, and soon after, Lady Melisandre looked up from her fire for a moment and looked towards the Queen. There was something dark in her eyes. There always was. The Lord of Light has ways to deal with her Uncle Renly, she would say to the young woman. All she would need to do is ask for guidance, and the Lord would provide in time. A look passed between her and her Uncle Stannis, though the young queen didn't notice. Something about this, though, sent a shiver down her spine, as it often did every time the Red Woman mentioned her lord, but for the time being, Lysandra chose to ignore it, as she always did. As it stood now, she still only tolerated her presence and theatrics, not truly believing in this Lord of Light, this mysterious red god. She wouldn't be buying into the supposed magic anytime soon. With her mind set now, the Queen gives the order. They will leave Dragonstone at once and make for Robb Stark, regardless of her uncle's displeasure. They decide to leave a light garrison at Dragonstone before departing, so they can defend the island. Though for right now, Lysandra truly believed that Dragonstone was under no real peril. Her uncle Renly wanted the Iron Throne just as badly as she did, and unlike her, he had the numbers to take it. It wouldn't be wise for him to waste the men sieging this island. And as much as her half-brother might want to, Lysandra knew that their mother would never let Joffrey leave his comfy seat in the Red Keep to act on the island either. She wouldn't put her favorite child at risk, she knew that much, nor expend the forces that they have protecting the city. With Tywin in the Riverlands and having yet to make its way back to them, they would need everybody they could find to bolster the city's defense in case of an attack by Renly and the Reach. So for now, she was sure of the island's safety, and felt no worries leaving her seat behind so she could seek this alliance. She leaves Sir Davos in charge of things while she's gone, having grown to trust the man over the years, viewing him like another, older uncle, while she, Stannis, the Red Woman, and a decent portion of her soldiers depart for the Riverlands to make the trek for Robb Stark and his people. It takes some time for them to get to the Riverlands, even when going by water. They do their best to avoid being seen by potential enemies as they tread water to make it to a port town. It works well enough, though she was sure that word was being spread by someone that she had left Dragonstone and was on the move. Eventually, the Queen and her people land around Harroway's town, near Harrenhal, the ruined castle where her grandfather was stationed, if word was to be believed. There was a brief moment on the road to Riverrun, where they made camp at night in the woods, and she wondered if it would be possible to take the ruined castle for herself. It would be risky, though not impossible, she surmised. If they took her grandfather by surprise while he was distracted with Robb Stark, and the whole of his forces weren't consolidated there at once, the men she had with her could potentially take the ruin. This could be advantageous to them, as it would give them a toehold in the Riverlands, and another base of operations closer to potential allies, or enemies depending on how this deal with Robb Stark went. That in mind, Lysandra would send scouts to check out Harrenhal, how many men they saw stationed there, what the defenses were like, and if her grandfather was present there as well. Later on, the scouts returned with news. It seems that Tywin has left Harrenhal and placed the Mountain in charge with a small garrison of men. Apparently, they heard a patrol talking about it, the Lion Lord's late-night flight a couple days ago, most likely heading back to King's Landing with his forces to help bolster the city. At least that's what she thought. In the Queen's mind, this was no doubt in fear of an impending attack by Renly. He had the largest army overall, and therefore the highest chances of taking the city. There would be no point in holding here and fighting Robb with a looming threat like that. This was a rare moment where the princess felt thankful for her uncle's treason. His folly saved her some men, and possibly won her a castle. No, in reality, unbeknownst to her, Robb was the reason that Tywin left. He acquired a foothold in the west and sought to relieve him of it. Either way, Lysandra was given an opportunity that she was not going to waste. The Queen had been keen for a battle these days, a chance to prove herself and let it be known that she was not just some girl playing pretend. She was more than that, a warrior, a queen, but most importantly, her father's daughter. And what better way to prove that than by putting down her grandfather's mad dog? The Queen and her uncle launched their attack the next day in the dead of night, taking the castle by surprise. It's easier than she expected at first, which baffles the Queen. And the guards that she expected to be posted near the gates are mysteriously dead. It seems that someone had beaten her to it, already gotten a head start on taking out some of the men inside. It gives her and her men pause for a moment as they clamber into the ruin and see the gore before them. And for a brief moment, she wondered if her scouts had been wrong. Out of the corner of her eye, she spots something, though, and turns to see a young girl who was walking towards the gate that she just came through, and her hiding friends. They both seem stunned and stare at each other for a moment, but soon the castle comes awake. The young girl runs to hide with her friends as the Mountain and his men come to meet them. In comparison to her forces, the 200 or so men with the Mountain are vastly outnumbered, as Lysandra has brought with her a bigger portion of her army. Still, the men decide to fight anyway, despite being outnumbered. Better to die on her swords than face the cruelty of the Mountain if they fled, she supposed. They all surged towards each other. Flesh meeting flesh, steel meeting steel. A man tried to pull her from her horse. And the chaos, with a swift turn of her blade, Lightbringer as the Red Woman had called it, she hacked off his hand. Another man came then, and she whacked the side of his helm with the flat of her blade. It sent him into the dirt, concussed. And then the Queen's horse, Justice, her lifelong friend and grandest gift from her father, trampled over him. Her uncle Stannis and other men made short work of their enemies, scared and disorganized after being snuck up on. They posed no real threat. There were no Arthur Daynes, Barristons, or Jaime Lannisters among them. Though there was a Mountain, a wild dog, a butcher swinging wildly at any meat that dared to come near him. The sight of the Mountain was the only thing that might have made her go still. She'd seen him before, but after all these years, she'd forgotten how big the man was, how lightly he swung a sword with one hand that was meant for two. She watched him, cutting down man and horse, sometimes both all together, and even his own men if they got in the way. To be honest, the sight of him scared her, but it only took a moment for her to bury that fear. He might have been bigger than most men, but she had the most men here, and he couldn't cut through all of them, especially if he was full of arrows. Lysandra summoned her archers and commanded her soldiers to clear away from the beast that the world insisted on calling a man. As Gregor Clegane sought to make his way towards the Queen, sensing an opening, he would find himself filled with arrows, particularly to his legs, though some would find his shoulders, and another would find his neck. It did little to stop him, though. Even as a newly made pincushion, he was still full of fury. He still did his best to heft and swing his sword, though it was more of a flail, if anything at all. At the sight of the Mountain, what remained of his men threw down their swords. Queen Lysandra ordered the men taken prisoner, and the Mountain to be subdued. It took 5 men to restrain him, even in his wounded state. Even full of arrows and his life slowly seeping out of him, the dog still had plenty of fight, even after the men finally managed to tear his sword away from him. Her uncle Stannis rode up beside her as she stared at the man on his knees now. "Do your duty," he told her. "Finish it." And the queen did. She dismounted from her horse, Lightbringer in hand, and made way for the mountain. It took more swings than she would have liked. She never expected that an execution would be this hard. Her father never explained it. Perhaps that's why he had Ilyn Payne do all the dirty work for him. She wondered if she had the wrong angle, or if she was just too weak. Ultimately, though, she came to the conclusion that the mountain's neck was just too thick. With all that muscle, it was no wonder that he lacked a brain. But either way, the mountain's head would see itself removed from his shoulders, and the queen claimed her first victory. She was sure her grandfather would be furious. A cheer rose from her men, and soon enough they went about securing the ruined castle, gathering any stragglers that remained throughout the castle that were loyal to the mountain. Lady Melisandre would approach her then and congratulate the queen on her victory, proclaiming that it would be the first of many that the Lord of Light had provided, as she knew he would. Lysandra nodded, disinterested, before going about her business. She took it upon herself to make her grandfather's old quarters her own, and set about the task of planning her next move. Of course, she still intended to meet with Robb Stark, though she contemplated sending him a letter and changing their meeting location to Harrenhal instead. But that would have to wait for a moment. After taking control of Harrenhal, Leah would free the captives, knowing most of them were innocents wrapped up in the schemes of House Lannister. She would also note that 200 of the captives were North and Rivermen, allies of Robb Stark. These men she would gather and make a public announcement, proclaiming that she had saved them from their captors, and while she was in charge of Harrenhal, they were no longer prisoners. They were free to leave if they wished, or if they felt a shred of gratitude towards her, then she would be more than happy to welcome them to her army should they decide to join her forces. If they did so, she would make sure that they had all the revenge that they wanted and more against House Lannister if they helped her come into her throne. If not, they were welcome to go. Or if they waited, she would allow them to return to Robb Stark when she met with him later on. In her mind, returning these North and Rivermen to Robb Stark could be seen as a peace offering, a show of good faith for Robb. That might do her well. There is a mix of reactions. Some decide to take their chances and leave. Others decide to stay, either choosing to fight for their savior or wait for Robb if she spoke true. One of the men who chose to stay comes up to her. He seems different from the rest. Smaller, not much of a warrior, clearly not a Northman, or a Riverlander at that. But he isn't a farmer or some average man. He's someone much more important. He introduces himself as Qyburn, a maester of the Citadel, and should the rightful queen require his services, he would be more than willing to lend them to her for saving his life. Something the queen accepts gratefully. But the introductions don't end there. Later on in her chambers, speaking with her uncle Stannis about their next course of action, as he tells her not to let one victory get to her head, some of her soldiers come in, said that they caught some people trying to escape. Lysandra says that the people are free to leave if they want to. She said as much during her announcement earlier, but her men believe this is someone that she's going to want to talk to. A young girl is shoved forward, the one she saw when she first entered the castle. The soldiers say that when they interrogated what was left of the mountain's men, they said that this girl was Tywin's cupbearer. He kept her close, served his food, poured his wine, and listened to his war counsels. Maybe she has something of value to the queen. Lysandra sits up at this and beckons the girl to come closer, who hesitantly complies. She asks for her name, and the girl responds with a question instead. Is she really going to meet Robb Stark? Lysandra is surprised by this. Of what interest could Robb Stark possibly be to this young girl? Either way, she says yes. In fact, it's her hope that they can be friends. Their fathers were, after all. The girl takes a deep breath, as if contemplating, and Lysandra tells her not to be scared, comforting her. She looked to be a common girl, probably forced to serve like many of the others here, but she reminded her of her sister Marcella and her cousin Shireen in a way, so she did her best to make her feel welcome. Eventually, the girl comes forward and says that her name is Arya Stark of Winterfell. This surprises everyone, as most had assumed that she was still being held prisoner in King's Landing. Lysandra was hesitant to believe it. She, after all, had never seen any of the Starks before, with the exception of Lady Catelyn, though that was only recently. So she had no way of verifying if what this girl was saying is true or not. If what she was saying was true though, then she was much more valuable than some girl who happened to know her grandfather. Perhaps she could have Robb Stark confirm it later on. If she was indeed acknowledged as Robb Stark's sister, then she may have come into a very valuable bargaining chip. Lysandra says that that's a bold claim, and it would be a grave idea to lie to her about such things. That's when one of her friends, who had also been dragged into the room, chimes in and says that she's not lying. The queen's attention turns to the boy, taller than the rest of his friends, dark-haired and gray-eyed, something about him seeming oddly familiar, in a way that the queen can't quite place. She asks for his name now. Gendry, he says. His name is Gendry. And that's where we're going to be leaving things for today. I hope you all enjoyed the latest installment of Robert Baratheon's Trueborn daughter. For once, it didn't take me 30 years to finally do a follow-up. And once again, I really enjoyed making this. But you guys let me know how much you like this video down below with your comments, along with hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Since you guys hit my last like goal pretty easily, I'm thinking about 1,200 likes on this video for me to entertain the idea of a part 3. That being said, thank you all for listening, I hope you all have a swell day, and I will see you all next time.